I'm going to demonstrate an application of the learning curve. In this scenario, our rate of learning is 80%. Now, some of the information for this problem is already given to us, but let's make sure we can work through that. Our very first unit produced from our experience is it took 100 hours, and the cumulative total time in labor hours, obviously since it's 1 unit is 100 hours, our total cost is 5,000. If we want to understand the cost per hour, 5,000 divided by 100 would be $50 per hour, and since it's 1 unit, the average cost per unit would also be 5,000. But if we were trying to use this information in our typical learning rate at 80% in order to estimate the time to produce additional units, how do we get this extra information? For example, how do we predict how long we thought it was going to take to produce unit number 2? Well, since we're doubling, going from 1 to 2, it's an easy approximation here. We just take the time that it took to make the first unit, 100 hours, multiply it times a rate of learning of 80%, and so we'd predict it would take us less time, because of the rate of learning, of only 80 hours. Cumulative time between units 1 and 2, 100 hours for unit 1, plus 80 hours for unit 2 is 180. How do we get total cost? Remember that I mentioned from unit number 1, we said 5,000 total cost divided by 100 hours is $50 per hour. We're going to use that $50 per hour times 180 hours, cumulative total cost of 9,000. Now we do need to actually calculate average cost per unit. Total cost of 9,000 divided by 2 units, and so our average cost per unit is going to be 5,400. Things get trickier when we get to unit number 3, because that's not doubling unit number 1. That's not doubling going from 2 to 3. Double to go from 2 to 4, but not 2 to 3. That's when we're going to have to use our learning formula of y equal a x to the b. So we're going to think about what we need to fill in here. The a is going to be how much time it took to produce unit number 1. That's 100 hours. Multiply that times x. X is what unit are we on now? Well, I'm on unit number 3. And take that to the power of the learning coefficient, and they tell us that that's going to be negative 0.321928. Now, you're probably going to have to use a calculator or Excel. I'm very impressed if you can do this in your head. And that would mean we're approximating that unit number 3 would take us 70.21 hours to produce. Add that for cumulative time to our estimated cumulative hours for 180 at 2 units, and so we think it would take us 250.21 hours to produce all 3 units. Multiply that times $50 per hour, 12,510.5 total cost. Divide that by 3 units in total to get an average cost of $4,170.17. Here's some good news. I can use that formula in order to approximate the time for unit number 4, but also I'm doubling things going from 2 to 4, so I can simply just take the 80 hours it took to produce unit number 2, or what we thought it was going to take, times our 80% learning rate and get 64 hours. Again, I'll let you go through the cumulative time and total cost and average cost per unit and work that out. The last piece of information that was given to us before we try to work through some information that wasn't given to us was the approximate time it took to produce unit number 8. Again, some good news here is we're doubling going from 4 to 8. So again, we can just take the time for unit number 4 of 64 hours times 80%. The approximation is 51.2 hours. Now, you won't have all the information to fill in the cumulative time and total cost. You'd have to work through all the additional information. I'll let you do that on your own just to prove out your understanding. But let's also test out some information that wasn't given to us, and that's unit number 5. Not doubling here, so we are going to have to go back to our formula. Y equal A. A is the time it took to make unit number 1, which is 100, times x, which is what unit we're on now, and that's the 5th unit, to the power of the learning coefficient, negative 0.321928, is going to be approximately 56.56 hours. So we're getting close to about half the time. We're not quite there, 56.56 hours. In cumulative time, it took us 314.21 approximate hours to make through unit number 4. Add the 59.56. Our estimation is 373.77 hours to make unit 1 through 5. Multiply that times $50 per hour. We get an estimated total cost of $18,688.50. Divide that by 5 units, and our approximation for average cost per unit, 5 units, is $3,737.70. Again, I'll let you work through unit number 6 and 7 to make sure you balance out to the totals for unit number 8.